Hi, Central Illinois. Have you ever met a lawyer that you trusted implicitly? Well, I've got one for you today. This is my guest today, Jeremy Heiple. Welcome, Jeremy.
Thank you, Renee. Pleasure being with you today.
Nice to be with you too. So, what was that term you said you're an oxymoron?
Yeah, so I don't mean any offense to anybody who's an English major or an English teacher, neither of which I ever was. But yeah, I like that word oxymoron. You think of two things that do not belong together. And in my case, it's the word Christian and lawyer. Those two put together is how we practice. It's the distinct difference of our approach to things. A very nice and distinct difference. And I like to use that word to let people know I'm not like most lawyers you run into out there.
Right. I know we met about 4 years ago through a networking group, and at the time it just struck me as how memorable that was. And even though we don't really know each other all that well, we've, crossed paths here and there, but you always have a very consistent message. And I know I can tell you have this passion for people
Thank you.
and love to help people. And I think you're probably helping people in just about their greatest time of need. Would you
That's
say?
the objective here. Many times I do meet these families in crisis, and that's why they walk through my front door and how we have to help them. But I also have an opportunity to get in front of folks to do some pre-planning, especially when it comes to estate planning issues, wills and trusts and powers of attorney, so that by doing some very pragmatic planning today, I don't have to meet their family in crisis just because they never got around to doing that planning.
So, how many people really are taking the bull by the horn and planning ahead of time like they should?
Procrastination is rampant among all of us. And, we all have that corner of our house or office or wherever where we park things that we don't want to deal with today, but someday I'm going to get there and deal with that. So if you were to ask people, do you intend to get a will done, get all of that stuff taken care of, they would say absolutely, but not today. And so my statistics that I come across say that if we rounded up 10 people at random, groups of 10, 7 out of 10 would never, ever, ever get around to this stuff, and 3 would have gotten around to it. And that's about the ratio that I see things. We have 7 out of 10 of the families who walked through the front door and never got around to the planning, sad to say, and I'm happy to help them get through the crisis and manage the crisis and try to contain the consequences of the crisis. But I would much prefer to have met their loved one long before that day and helped them avoid putting their family in that predicament.
Right. So, I'm not, okay, I shouldn't probably say too much, but I always want to talk about my own family, but how about my ex-husband's family? My ex-mother-in-law,
And you're telling me this is all truthful and not hypothetical.
no, this is truthful.
Okay,
That's how I roll here.
okay.
So, my ex-husband's mother pre-planned everything. And, then when when she passed and those 4 siblings had to deal with everything, it was just smooth as can be.
And so that's exactly how it should work.
Yeah.
With the planning, we anticipate the conflict, we anticipate the speed bumps, we work through all of that stuff and have it done so that, yes, the documents are now going to execute themselves with a tiny little legal footprint, and they won't get hung up in the process that otherwise the law has waiting for those 7 out of 10 who never got around to it.
So I'm just curious, the 7 out of 10 that don't get around to it seems to be pretty close to the same statistics with the number of people who are in debt. Do you think maybe it's part of it is that they just feel like they can't afford that right now, or they have other things they'd rather spend their money on than planning something they could always put off till next month?
So there are some common misconceptions that people, if you pin them down, why haven't you gotten this done? Or if you were leaning into them to try to get it done, some of the common excuses they would give you. Many of them will tell you they think they've got all the time in the world to get around to it, right? Well, I really am going to get to that, just not this year. That'll be next January. Those famous New Year's resolutions that never come to fruition, right? Because they just stay in the planning stage. For those folks, the reality is we don't know today, tomorrow, next year. And the truth is there is a day on the calendar when life happens and something happens and something has now irrevocably intervened that you're not able to do that planning anymore. It could be there was a stroke, you're alive, but you're useless to us to do documents, or a fatality in a car wreck, or cancer. It all just happens.
Yes.
So the true procrastinators who say, well, I really sincerely mean to get around to this, I'm just not going to do it today, and they believe they have all the time in the world, the danger is no, they don't. Other folks I run into with common excuses are folks who think they can do it themselves. Well, you know what? I'm just going to go online
Oh,
and find a
yes.
form, and I'm going to fill in some blanks. I'm going to hit print, and that'll get it taken care of. And the danger of all of that, of course, is you don't know what you don't know. So when they don't put that in front of a lawyer to at least have the lawyer review it and make sure that it's done right and signed right and all of that, they could have some very false piece thinking everything's taken care of, and now their family walks into me with this document that is useless to us because it's defective. Something wasn't done right that should have been done.
Right. I see a lot of commercials on TV. Not, I don't watch much TV, but it's frequently on when I'm cooking or something. And so I just saw a commercial recently about, oh, just go on to, I don't even know what website it was. Go on to this website, and it sounded like 5 minutes later, everything's going to be totally taken care of.
Yeah, if only, right?
Right.
So, when we do all those transactions on the internet, there's always a click here to accept terms button somewhere, right? And if you were to read the terms before you click to accept the terms, they go on and on and on and on. And I would say it's safe to say few people, if any, actually read those other than lawyers. But if you were to go into one of those websites for a will kit or something like that and read the terms before you click to accept, you would find them saying things like, we are not lawyers. We are simply making some templates or forms available for you. You use these forms at your own peril. We're not making any warranty or guarantee or anything that these forms are actually going to work for your intended purposes because we're not lawyers. We're just giving you forms. And then number 3, you'll find in those terms a disclaimer that says you ought to consult an attorney. And if you want to, for an additional fee, we'll connect you to a lawyer who would be willing to meet with you. And so that's all embedded down there in the terms, all because they don't want the lawsuit of, oops, this will did not work out right, and now I've got all this chaos on my hands.
Right. So my brother passed away last year. He was 46 years old. He had about an 8-month battle with colon cancer. And I know he was fortunate enough to get everything in line, but I am just guessing he hadn't actually done that before the diagnosis, probably, and it had to be more challenging for him and his wife, to come to that reality, when you're still like hoping for the best and praying, and do you know what I mean? Like you're just wanting to believe the best is going to come, but you also know you have to go and get this taken care of.
Oh, yeah.
And although someone in that situation should like see the writing on the wall, so to speak, the importance of this and everything, they still have kids at home and all that. But if they would have done it before, then there just wouldn't even be that stress. It's like, well, we can tweak it if we want,
Right.
based on these circumstances.
Right.
But if you have a clear mind and you're calm and everything's, normal, so to speak, you
Exactly.
probably approach it
So
differently.
the reality is we're all responsible adults, right? We know there's certain things we
Oh,
need
yeah.
to take care of. And so as a responsible adult, this is just one of those grown-up issues that everybody needs to take care of. And you're right. To sit down and do this planning in a non-crisis mode means we have all the time in the world to sit down and have 2 meetings or 3 meetings or 4 meetings to think about alternatives, to focus and polish and get things the way they really want it, rather than have to be in hurry-up mode because we're facing a medical crisis. And we have had those tragic circumstances where we've had to go to hospital deathbeds or to people's homes in the last days of their lives and get these documents done under those circumstances. And you can only imagine superimposing the stress
Right.
of now lawyers and their staff in the home or in the hospital making some very quick decisions and getting things signed from a hospital bed or a bed at home, when the reality is, oh my goodness, this is not how you should be having to spend these days. This should be a time, do you want your family to have this be the memory of your last days? We had one where a gentleman who had been sent to me by his doctor had been told, we cannot do anything more for you. You have a few months at best. You need to get your affairs in order, right? It's that classic conversation. So the guy comes in to meet with me. We have the chat. I'm ready to put him on the calendar to come back and sign his documents. And he says, well, before I do that, I want to make one last fishing trip up to Canada with my buddies. So when I get back from the fishing trip, I'll come on in and get this done. And of course, he has a crisis while he's there. They get him back to Chicago. Chicago sends him home with days to go. And now we, in his last days, we're in the last week, pack up my office and go up to his home with 2 alternatives. It's either A or it's B, but we don't have time to work on anything else. You got to pick one of these and sign it right here, right now. Wow. the stress in the
Oh,
room was just palpable, and the poor family will always remember having to deal with that when it should have been different memories at that point in time.
right. Oh, that's sad. Yeah. So, what about some of the things that you help people with that maybe aren't, like at that stage
Sure.
of life, possibly? Like you help people with divorce situations. What would, or, like
So we
in
are
what
a
capacity?
general practice law firm, and we encounter individuals and families in the very common scenarios that they're all going to run into with the legal system. All of a civil nature. I don't do anything of a criminal nature. I don't
Mm-hmm.
take criminal cases. But on the civil front, we help people routinely with buying and selling real estate. If their
Okay.
home's for sale or they're buying a home, making sure all the formalities are properly followed there. Again, I'd much rather work with them on the front end while they're finalizing the contract and getting ready for the closing than instead meet them after the closing when something didn't work out
Yeah.
and we've got a hairball of a mess on our hands because
Right.
something wasn't right. Residential and commercial real estate transactions. I also help people out with routine personal injury and workers' compensation claims, but it's got to be the real deal. It's got to be an authentic injury. I always say I'm not that guy in the back of the phone book who's just signing people up to try to make a case out of something that may not be there. It's got to be reasonable that they need an advocate to get
Mm-hmm.
them through the process, not an advertiser simply trying to drum up business. And then I help a lot of family businesses, mom and pop corporations and LLCs who have need to have routine documents done with the Secretary of State's office and routine corporate paperwork so all their business affairs are in order for just the day-to-day running of their businesses.
Mm-hmm. Okay. So, you had told me that you help with arbitration. Under what sort of circumstances do you help with that?
Yeah, so besides all the work I do helping clients out in particular areas of the law, I'm also an arbitrator and a mediator. And when I put on that hat, I'm getting in the middle of a legal dispute that would otherwise be at the courthouse, or one that perhaps has already started at the courthouse and they finally figured out that's not where they want it to finish.
Yeah.
So when I'm a mediator, I'm hired by the two sides to get in the middle and to help them find common ground and work back and forth with negotiations to get things settled so that at the end of the day, we've got it resolved without having to go through the court process.
Mm-hmm.
When we can't get it resolved that way through mediation, but they still agree on one thing at least, that they don't want to be in court at each other's throats, they don't want all of that stress and expense and hassle, then I serve in an arbitration role where we now set some boundaries. Typically, these are disputes over money. Somebody owes somebody some money.
Money? What are you
Business,
talking
business to
about?
business disputes, or perhaps we have a circumstance where mom and dad passed and the adult children are now squabbling over how the estate's going to be resolved.
Mm-hmm.
So typically, it's a monetary dispute, and we set some boundaries. I'm not going to award any more than a certain amount or any less than a certain amount, so they know what the ballpark looks like before we even start. And then I greatly simplify the process of what would otherwise take place in court so that instead of it taking days or a week to get through all of that in front of a conventional judge or jury, we can, in the matter of a few hours or perhaps a day, get it worked out and they both leave with a decision that they can agree to live with and have spared themselves all of that stress that would be part of the conventional court process.
Right. Yeah. So, who might these people be? Like, you're talking, like you said, siblings? So people other than people who are, have lost a parent,
Sure.
lost their parents and the siblings, who else might
So
you
one of my
find
happy
working with?
ones that I was actually able to get resolved was a family business dispute. So
Okay.
mom and dad found the business. Dad dies. Mom isn't really comfortable running the business, so now the adult kids, come in to run the business. And suddenly things are not working out well relationally between the kids. Imagine that, right?
Right.
Sibling disagreement, family dysfunction. And it gets so bad that mom and daughter fire son and brother from the business, and now he sues them. And he drags his own mom and his own sister into court over a lawsuit over the business.
Oh.
And they're at each other's throats and they're all lawyered up. And finally, somebody says, hey, you need to go see Jeremy and see what you can do to get this worked out. Now, I couldn't get it done immediately. We had to have a lot of dialogue back and forth. But at the end of some very hard, very emotionally challenging discussions, we finally got it to resolution so that they weren't in court. We got an agreed outcome that they had finally decided on. And I won't say that they were on the best of speaking terms at the end of that, but we had planted some seeds.
Mm-hmm.
That's always my goal. We had planted some seeds that not only resolved the legal dispute, but now we're on a path that hopefully they can reconcile the relationship. Maybe not 100%, but good enough that they can deal with each other again and behave cordially toward each other when they're out in public, that kind of thing.
Yeah, I should hope so. When you lose a family member, you all of a sudden, or I did at least, you start to see things from a different perspective. And those petty little things have a way of just falling aside, And I know that I've always been close with my sister, but we're three of us in the family. But since losing our brother, we're even closer, But we haven't had any disputes. I mean, everything that was his is still his wife's, you know what I mean? Or in that household. Um, and, I did think about like, what could this be like when our parents pass away someday, and then what would it be like with all the different siblings? How do you advise people when there's like the in-laws involved? Do you suggest that they try to just keep it amongst the siblings,
So we
or
definitely have a conversation about what those options can look like. But essentially, in this planning phase, I'm trying to anticipate where is the conflict in this family because, I don't know these people that well. I'm meeting them for the first time. I'm getting to know them through a series of meetings, but I've never sat around the dinner table or been around on Thanksgiving when,
right?
some of those hot button issues flare up. So I don't have great insight on the dynamics. But I try to bring to the surface what are the potential sources of conflict? How's everybody getting along with each other? And then identifying where the hot spots might be. How do we plan around those, or how do we plan to minimize those opportunities? So if my conference room table could talk, if it could, it would tell you that some of the worst disputes I've had to moderate among the adult children, or sometimes so-called adult children,
Right.
is not over the big ticket issues. That's just math. It's percentages or fractions, or it's dividing assets up where everybody's treated in a certain very fair way. The disputes come over the stuff that's been left behind, and sometimes surprisingly so, where somebody thinks, mom wanted me to have that. Well, I don't know, mom didn't say. Or that should always go to the oldest. Or great grandma's quilt, should go this way. And we know this much. We're not going to cut great grandma's quilt into 5 pieces and give each of the kids one, right?
Yeah.
We have to resolve this. So those are the hot button disputes that we try to plan around and get that settled. So we've decided those emotional issues in front and built that into the documents. So now, whether they like it or not, at least they're not going to have a huge fight over it that could cause lasting wounds. Those wounds just don't heal quickly.
Yeah. And for decades, people can carry these thoughts in their minds of, she got the wedding dress, she got the wedding ring. You know what I mean?
See, my best example, this is my poster child. Everything else had worked out fine for this family, everything. And 2 surviving adult daughters, both in their upper 60s, both intelligent women, accomplished in their professional fields, came down to a dispute over one thing, a clock that neither one of them had given the parents. And it wasn't a clock that had any particular value to it, but these 2 stubborn gals were not going to compromise. And so it's been almost 20 years now. But this clock, kind of like a kid in a divorce, spends 1 year with daughter number 1, and now goes for a year to daughter number 2, and then goes back for a year to daughter number 1.
No.
And whoever's the last daughter standing keeps the clock because they will not compromise. I even went out trying to see if I could find an identical clock somewhere else so I could have 2 of them say, you each take one. It's all, I won't tell you which one's the real one.
Yeah.
But no, they just could not compromise. So you would be amazed how what seems like small
Yeah.
becomes huge in their eyes.
Wow. Oh my
And
gosh.
really, do you want to pay a lawyer to go through that stuff? No.
No.
Let's plan around it.
Yeah. So I know when I was about 25, so just a few years ago,
When we all were. Yes.
my great grandmother passed away, and there were just a lot of different family members kind of coming in, and she didn't even have that much stuff left or anything. But I remember my mom asking me, we were cleaning out her kitchen, and she's like, is there anything that you are hoping to get?
Nice.
And I said, I just want like a small remembrance. And so I have this little a toothpick holder, really. that she always had in the kitchen, and she always used the toothpicks, and you know what I mean? So it was just something that I could always carry with me. And when I look at it, I know that was
And it's a
hers.
happy memory. That's grandma.
Yes,
Yeah.
exactly. And then she had these little juice glasses that were just clear glasses, but they were a little bit, beveled near the top. And they weren't anything special. But I saw some exactly like them in a dollar store, like years later. And it's like I bought a couple of them just because that reminded me
Sure.
of
Sure.
her. Now, later, I think I got her wedding ring. My mom, soon after she passed, I graduated from college, and my mom had it made into a necklace. Do you know how bad I have felt for not wearing that
Oh my.
necklace?
Oh my. So that's the other lesson that comes out of this stuff. So there are a handful of very sentimental things that can be flashpoints if it's not worked out. But the other sad reality for folks is many times the things they thought were important, that they thought the family would want, that they thought the kids would all have to have, end up headed to Goodwill or some other thrift charitable outreach just because they don't want that stuff.
Yeah,
And
yeah.
yet their
Well,
houses are packed full
I
of it.
remember thinking, that it was so thoughtful. It was, thoughtful of my mom to give that to me as a gift for a special occasion, and all that good stuff. You know what I mean? It's nice that it was hers, and yet at the time I was like, but it's shaped like a heart, and I don't like heart-shaped things.
Positive here, though, is
You
you
know?
have a memory of very happy things worked
Yeah.
out well. You're not thinking back to, oh, that blankety blank relative of mine
Right.
who took off with grandma's
Yeah.
whatever it was.
Yeah.
So it worked out well with
I
your
know,
family.
yes,
And that's
it
that's
really
the
did.
legacy you want to leave behind,
Yeah.
right? Is
Yeah.
positive family relations.
So, being 52 years old, I have been to a lot of memorial services and funerals in the last 3 years. It seems like every month I'm going to something. And that really makes you think, about like this time is limited. How do I want people to remember me? What's really important? Did they accomplish what they wanted to accomplish, or does it even matter now? Or
So seriously, what is your legacy, right? I mean, that's the
yeah,
word, legacy. What is the legacy you left behind with all that time?
yeah,
And those are important questions that I think we all wish we might have looked at a younger stage in our life when we were too busy every day and every week just getting through what we had to do. But yeah, that's the magic question. What's the legacy you're leaving
right.
behind here? And your grandmother did a great job.
Yeah. So do you find that there's a certain time in a person's life when they tend to think about this stuff? Like is it when their own parents die, or when they hit a certain age, or
So
what are the triggers?
there certainly are life events that bring people through my doors to get this done positively. One is simply the fact of getting married or the arrival of a first child. Those are big impetuses that people suddenly realize, hey, I'm a grown up now, I need to get this stuff done, and we help people with that planning. So that's a very good signal to get in and get things done. Yes, the passing of a loved one can be a wake up call for a number of people, especially if it might have been a colleague they were working with who went prematurely. I'm seeing that now in my profession. So I'm 55, and I think back over the 30 years I've been a lawyer, and I'm now seeing peers who are unexpectedly falling ill and passing and things happening, and do think at the moment is, so now it's their memorial service, and the question is, what was their legacy? And that prompts me to say, what should mine be?
Yeah.
Another big one that gets people to finally get off dead center and get things done is vacations, believe it or not. When they're heading away somewhere
Yeah.
and flying somewhere, they suddenly think, wow, if something were to happen, I better make sure I've got this stuff done. So this time of year, summer, is when I see a huge uptick in people who come in just because there's a vacation looming on the calendar.
Yeah. Isn't that interesting? We take our life in our own hands driving to work every day,
Right.
but we get on an airplane and it's an event. Oh my gosh, I gotta call Jeremy.
And of course, the statistics would say much less likely a plane crash than to
Yeah.
be in a car wreck within 5 miles of your house. Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
That's pretty funny. Okay, so in a perfect world, what would people do first?
Sure. So the hardest thing for them is to simply get on the calendar, show up, and get started. Once they do that, Simple task. It's that easy. Now I run the calendar with them to have them follow up and get things done. So we'll have an initial meeting to sit down and talk about the family picture, the scenarios of who's involved, some things they think they might want to do. And now I give them some homework to take home and work on to think about those issues on a deeper level, and have them back to, with the homework completed, now make some decisions, have them back maybe a time beyond that to go over some documents and get them signed. And then thanks to the modern era of word processing and laser printers and all of that, we can keep them very current so that what I've done for them now is modifiable, on a day's notice or two if they want to, so we can keep those documents fresh as they see life circumstances happening.
It sounds like you make things as easy and painless as absolutely possible.
That's the goal. That's the goal. I think there should be a healthy allergic reaction maybe to lawyers. It shouldn't, people, it shouldn't like to hang out with lawyers because of all the conflict that surrounds lawyers. But in my sense, I'm trying to help them get in front of legal issues before the crisis has happened, so that now if and when the crisis happens, no legal challenges at that point. It's taken care of. Who's in charge is who they said would be in charge. Where things go is where they said things would go. They're not paying crazy fees to go through a court process of conflict.
Yeah. Okay. Well, Jeremy, I appreciate your insight so much. I think that, oftentimes these are things that we just keep putting off and we don't even think about. And the majority of people, especially the ones that are maybe watching this, they don't have the privilege of, hearing you give a 10 or 20-minute talk at a networking meeting. And so it's nice to have you share,
Thank you.
these
Thank you.
perspectives and everything. And if you're watching this, I highly encourage you to check out Jeremy's website, heiple.com. I will put a link for that in this post, but Heiple is how it's spelled.
Correct.
And, just don't let those really life-threatening things come up before you take action. I have found that whether it's deciding to change your diet or go back to school or whatever the case may be, sometimes we make more of it in our minds than what it really is. And if you just take action, things kind of fall into place, and a professional like Jeremy can really help you, give you that peace of mind, right?
Thank you. So that really is it. At the end of the day, not only have we avoided legal conflict, but they've left with a huge peace of mind that there's nothing to worry about now. It's under control.
Exactly. And I think that's what we all want more than anything. We just avoid it out of fear. But anyway, so thank you, Jeremy. Appreciate you being here
My
today.
pleasure. It's been a joy being here with you today. Thanks.
Yeah, thanks.
PeoriaLife.com